On this episode of Death by Adulting, back to school time. Tips and tools to make your child's return to school stress-free and fun. Walking the tightrope of back to school anxiety? Is it possible to have too much of a good thing? Nah. How the heck not to hover? Just say no to your inner helicopter parent, plus much, much more. Roll the intro.
Welcome to Death by Adulting. I'm Megan Scheibner with my co-host Dr. Steve Scheibner, and it's back to school.
Yeah.
I've got my back to school haircut and my school vest, and I'm ready.
Do you have your transparent backpack so we can see all of your stuff?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I would forget it anyway.
You would.
So it's time to talk about back to school, and you know what? Like it or not, back to school means change, and change is hard. Not just for our kids, change is hard for us too. And so we want to talk about some of the pitfalls of back to school and then some really practical tips to help make it a little less stressful for you. So, kids face back to school differently, and they always have. Yeah. For example, I was the child who counted down how many days until I could go back to school. And you were the child
who counted down how many days I had still on summer vacation.
Yeah, two very different kids.
Two totally different mentalities. Did you ever get that checked out? Did you ever go see a doctor about that? Because
I always felt sorry for people like you.
No, honey. It's normal not to want to go back to school.
I just really loved
the yellow
school.
School bus was like torture. I mean, it's not. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
When you're a little boy, all you want to do is run and play.
Yeah. Well, probably what helped is I never had to take the yellow school bus, so that made life better for me. And in case you're wondering, this episode is not just for public school kids or private school kids. It's for you homeschoolers too, because you need to have a delineation of not school if you want to move forward.
Regardless of how you school, what are the tips and tools for helping make it stress-free and fun for your kids?
Right. And so one of the first things we want to talk about is back to school does cause anxiety. Sometimes it's for the parents, sometimes it's for the children. So how do we help our kids with that anxiety, and how do we keep from making it worse?
Okay, good question.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
Well, I think you got to get ahead of it a little bit. You can't let it catch you up and all of a sudden it's 2 days before you're going back to school and you haven't done any prep for that. The other part is, and I would say it's so easy to make the back to school jokes, Yeah. How many times have we gone to church and it was the Sunday before school started again and the pastor got up and said, "Hey, it's back to school week this week. Amen, everybody. Can I get an amen on it?" And that mentality of I'm going to get rid of my kids like somehow there's some sort of a disease or I don't like having them around. I've never liked that mentality. I love having the kids around. Yeah, back to school is a thing. But let's not communicate to our kids we can't wait for them to get out of the house because they're somehow annoying to us or get on our nerves. They might, but we don't want to communicate that to them either.
Yeah.
All right. So let's not make a joke about it. Those are my thoughts on back to school. But you're much more the practical side of how do you get them out the door and back to school in a way that is anxiety free.
Well, there are kids that are going to be more anxious. And so I think we do have to address that with them. And you touched on it. The more prepared we are, the less anxiety there is. So if they know where their backpack is hanging, they know where their shoes are, they know that they've got lunch in their bag, they know where show and tell is. I was a really anxious kid and so excited about school. And the first day of kindergarten, forgot that the show and tell we were supposed to bring was in my raincoat pocket. And that was the start of a bleeding ulcer by first grade. And I became so anxious. And so as parents, we do need to deal with that. But we also...
You had a bleeding ulcer as a child?
I did.
Wow.
Anxiety, man.
Yeah,
and I should have told you that before you married me. But the other side of that is we can make it a whole lot worse if we do. Are you nervous about going back to school? Are you afraid? I'm sure your teacher will like you. Every child has that fear that their teacher isn't going to like them. And if we feed that, then we're the problem. And so parents, I would say be careful. If your child isn't showing signs of being anxiety, be happy about it. Don't try and dig it up. Aren't you nervous?
Right.
Aren't you worried about how it's going to go? It is true. Didn't you worry about whether your teachers would like you?
No.
Okay, so my kindergarten teacher didn't like me. That was part of the anxiety. You will remember this story. At one point, I went out the window of the school and went home because I was so anxious. Yeah. But imagine being a homeschooler and being worried about it. So, what if my teacher doesn't like me? Yeah, okay. But I do want to talk to homeschoolers a minute, because if there's this huge difference between summer mommy and school time mommy, yeah. Get rid of the split personality. The kids need the same mom all the time, right? And part of the dread that I know that homeschool kids have is mom who was so laid back and had her coffee and said, I don't know, just stay outside and play, all of a sudden becomes, 10 o'clock we do this, 10:15 we do this, 11 o'clock. So be careful. Don't make them more anxious. Because that is a thing.
It is a thing.
All right. How about, is it possible to have too much of a good thing?
No.
You're such a bad kid.
Well, I've answered your question.
But it is possible. And back to school feeds that monster in us because there are so many activities.
See, that's the difference between you and me. You think that it's possible to have too much of a good thing. I think it's not possible to have too much of a good thing.
Okay, well, I'm going to remind you.
I would like to get sick overeating dessert sometime, just to see if it's really a thing.
Well, that's a different good thing.
Yeah.
I want to remind you of the worst parenting decision year we ever made. Are you ready? So our youngest three, as you'll recall, Bailey, Stephen, and Tate, were athletes. Mm-hmm. And one year we decided to let our athletes do 2 sports each in a season because it was such good opportunities for them. And it destroyed our family dynamic because all we were doing was running around in the car and forgetting baseball belts and forgetting cleats and running back home, and no family dinners because one child was home at 6, one was home at 8, one had a 9 o'clock game under the lights, right? So is it possible to have too much of a good thing?
Well, I'm going to say publicly that I'll forgive you for making that decision for our family. And I guess I should have stepped in as the head of the family and said something, but I just thought I wanted to make you happy.
Yeah, no. I would say that was a we decision.
All right,
but the same could be true of band. The same could be true of play practice. You can do too much. And so as a parent, your job is to discern between good and excellent.
Well, most parents, they just get involved in way too much.
Yeah.
It seems because you're trying to build a resume, you want to keep up with all the other parents, and everybody else is doing, they're doing violin lessons, soccer practice, taekwondo, and they're running around in the van constantly. During the pandemic, we lived in a neighborhood, house driveway, the suburbs, right, little cul-de-sac. I never saw any kids.
Yeah, I had no idea there were so many kids in our neighborhood
until the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, there's kids because they weren't going to school. And they're doing kids stuff. They're riding scooters, playing games, kickball out in the street. And then as soon as the pandemic was over, they're all gone again. Why? Because they're back in the van running around doing way too much. And I think that's not healthy for them.
Yeah.
It wasn't healthy for us.
Just because something's good doesn't mean it's best.
Correct.
And you get to make that decision. I think I've said this before, but I don't regret the times I said no to things. I do regret saying yes without thinking it through.
Yeah.
Because you can't quit. You don't want to teach your kids to quit.
Right.
Right. And you don't want to take away things you've let them have.
So in the same way for us, it brings our stress level, our anxiety level down. It also does the same thing for the kids because they're overscheduled and overdoing. And it raises their fun quotient because it's more fun, the activities that they do go to, instead of just trying to fit in too many activities, and none of them are fun and they're all stressed out.
Exactly. So there can be too much of a good thing.
Too much of a good thing?
Just think before you jump in. All right. And that goes for you too, moms. That absolutely goes for you too, not just for your kids. And then finally, you talked about basically parking the helicopter. So tell me what you mean.
Well, we've dealt with a lot of different parents over the years, and that's kind of our sweet spot of our ministry and our outreach is parenting. And our 9 Practices of the Proactive Parent series is available on characterhealth.com, and it's a wonderful, comprehensive series. In that, we talk about different types of parenting styles. And there's the resume parent, the parent that's trying to get this kid such a well-rounded resume and portfolio so that they'll get into the right college, get the right job, and all of those sort of
Right.
things. That's one mentality. There was the snowplow parent that basically snow plowed a path for their child and orchestrated every moment of every day for that child. They would come up with play dates and what time the play date was and who it was with. And then that child goes off to college and they don't know how to function
Yeah.
on the weekend. As long as they've got school, right, and they know that to be at this class at 8 a.m., they can get there. But once it comes to making their own schedule, they're lost.
Yeah, that parent takes away any discomfort.
The helicopter parent now is the one that hovered over the child all the time, never wanted to let the child fail. And so they would interject themselves at every moment that it even looked like the child was going to fail. And so if the child got a bad or a lower grade in school, that parent would be right up in the face of the teacher or the principal saying, hey, you can't do this to my kid. My kid's got to get into the school. You got to adjust their grade. This is a parent who wrote the papers for their child so that the child would get better grades. That's a helicopter parent. They're constantly hovering and swooping in to make sure that the child doesn't fail. You're doing your child a huge disservice by doing that. Huge. Why? Because the greatest lessons in life come from failure, not success. We fail more than we succeed. So once that child gets out in the real world and they're faced with failure, they melt down. They don't know how to handle that at all. Why? Because they've not built the resilience and the bounce backedness, if that's a word, to recovering from a failure because they were never allowed to fail. So mom and dad, stop hovering, stop swooping in. If the child gets a bad grade or they get a lower grade, say to them, hey, you need to work harder next time. What can I do to help you work harder? Maybe we can take some things off your plate, too much activity, so that you have more time for your schoolwork. The one little side note, one of the greatest lessons I ever got was in 9th grade. I went to public school. I was in 9th grade. I was a C plus student. I loved life. I really did. And there were girls. And girls were the best invention that God ever made. I mean, I was just distracted all the time. I didn't really want to study very much. So I would always look for the short line at the motor vehicle department, if you know what I mean, when it came to studying. And so there was an English test. I didn't do very well at English, what 9th grade boy does. And I decided, this is bad, I decided on my first test that I was going to cheat. And so I wrote down the crib notes on my hand for what I thought were going to be the questions.
You weren't a very good cheater.
Right? But I wrote them on my right hand, right? This is important, right hand. And so the test comes and I'm looking at it and I'm checking the notes and I'm going back and I filled it out right away and I got all the answers right. And I'm like, this is awesome, right? Now, little Stevie Scheibner was never the first person to hand in his test. In fact, I was always either the last or the second last person to hand in an exam. So I'm the first person done with this exam. I walk up to the teacher, I put it on her desk with my right hand open. Her radar was already up, like that. She looks at my hand, she grabs my hand, she looks at it, she sees all the notes on my hand. She reaches into her desk, she pulls out a big red marker and she writes F. And then she circles it, right? And then she holds it up for the rest of the class like this. Steven just got an F. And then she rips it up and she throws it in the trash. And I had to turn around and do the walk of shame back to my desk. And that was the most important life lesson I ever got about cheating. Because I realized, number one, I was stupid. But number two, I was embarrassed in public because of that. She allowed me to fail in an epic fashion. But that changed my character DNA right there on the spot. I thought, I don't ever want to have this happen again. Mom and Dad, if you swoop in and don't allow that moment to take place because you interjected yourself somehow or you went after that teacher and said, you can't give my kid an F, you've really done your child a disservice. And so I would say, and I don't know how we got off on all of that, but that's the disservice that a helicopter parent does for a child.
But the reason we say park the helicopter is you're going to do it if you don't plan not to.
Right.
Because all the other parents are going to do it and you're going to feel like, well, everybody else is going in and defending their child. I need to also, don't do it. Teach into it at home. Now, there are times to go talk to a teacher to find out if, what's going on. It seems like you don't like my child, whatever. But remember, there are two sides to every story. Mm-hmm. And if you go in guns blaring and saying nobody does that to my child, you're doing your children a disservice. Right. And so be careful. And those of you who homeschool, our hovering looks a little different. We're not going to go complain to the teacher because we are the teacher. But when we hover over our kids and we correct their papers before they even finish them, we don't let them make mistakes. We overlook mistakes because we don't want them to feel bad. We're doing the same disservice.
Yeah, when our kids are doing an exam and we come over their shoulder and go, "Are you sure?" Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't hover.
Let them fail and then teach into the failure.
Yeah. So there's 3 pitfalls, but now we want to give you some fun things to do to actually make back to school fun. So everybody gets a list of things they have to get, and some of it, quite frankly, is really hard to find. But go get the things on the list, take your kids with them, you let them pick them out, and then I would encourage you to do a back to school celebration dinner. And so make a special dinner, especially make a special dessert. And then at that dinner, ask your kids to share their 3 favorite memories from the summer. And you share yours too. And kind of enjoy a moment of remembering how much fun you had together in the carefree days of summer. And then go around the table again and ask them to share the 3 things that they're most looking forward to this year. And mom and dads, you do it too. And maybe the things you share are growth things. Well, I'm looking forward to our family growing in this area, or I'm looking forward to our family achieving this, or getting better at this. And then spend some time praying for each other. Make it a send-off dinner. That will help get rid of some of the anxiety and make it more anticipatory. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm really looking forward to this. And then one of the things that makes back to school the hardest is the change in routines. So where summer, maybe we slept in a little later, maybe we stayed up a little later, maybe we were a little laid back with some of the rules. School's going to make us have to tighten those things up. And that can be a really abrupt change. So I would encourage you the week before you go back to school to begin to incorporate some of those changes. Well, we're going to go to bed at our bedtime. Oh, we're going to start getting up. I know we don't have to get up this morning, but we're going to do that. Let's practice where we put everything, where our backpacks go. Where do I want papers that need to be signed to go? Right. Who's going to pack the lunch? Maybe you have a child that's packing lunches this year. Work through it so that the first morning you're not starting the back to school yelling, which really is really easy to happen. Right. You don't want to be that parent that gets to school with a child that left the house with 2 shoes and showed up with only 1. Yeah. Right. And so the more you practice those things, the less stress there is, the less anxiety, and the more fun back to school can be.
Sure, absolutely. Now, if you've made it this far and you like what you're seeing so far, which I think you do, and we've earned it, do us a favor and subscribe. You don't want to miss any of this content, and we'd love to have you on board as subscribers. And click that like button as well. Share it with your friends on social media if you think about it. That would be helpful to us. Okay, so back to the parents now, and going around the table talking about the 3 things that they're excited about. All right, mom and dad, don't do this. All right. If you have 3 kids, don't go, I'm excited about you going back to school, you going back to school, and you going back to school. Those are my 3 things. Come on.
Don't do it.
Just
don't do it.
Just don't go there.
Yeah.
You can have that private conversation.
Yeah.
Don't do it in front of the kids.
If you do that, when they're sick, they're going to be like, Mom hates that I'm home. Right. And especially if you're a homeschooler.
Yeah, I know. It's even worse. It's even worse.
All right. Back to school. It can be anxiety producing, but you're the key. You can help your kids get through it. And it should be fun. There are so many opportunities with back to school, and just make the best of it.
Yeah, you always made going back to school fun. And you just brought me along, right? But I had fun, kind of kicking it off and making it a special event.
Yeah.
And if you homeschool, it's more difficult to do that because you're not sending them out to go. Yeah. They're not in a new classroom this year. They don't have a new teacher. They don't, all that stuff it's the same old for them in some ways. And so the delineation between today and we're schooling tomorrow could be kind of not very exciting.
Yeah, it's muddied.
Yeah. But you always made it a real event, and they look forward to it. And they got some new stuff too.
Yeah.
Along the way. So, don't be pikers, celebrate that moment.
Yeah, especially if you homeschool year round. Our kids do need those natural breaks in their year.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's fun. I miss the back to school days, to be honest. I don't miss all the teaching days, but I do miss back to school.
Right.
So, that's been our special back to school edition of Death by Adulting. And remember, when it comes to adulting, what doesn't kill you just makes you tired.